This episode of Soul Space Personalized. This is one episode out of a 7-part series that will be brought to you throughout February of 2023. Thank you to my guests, Rebecca Rose, Daryl, James, and Tony Rodrigues for being a part of this. The purpose or intention of bringing this to you is bringing to highlight some of the harder topics, some of the darker aspects of our world so that we can bring a greater awareness and light to it. And not only that, but to share ways that we can all heal as individuals and heal as a collective, so that we can move into a more brighter, more liberated world with better understanding, more peace and harmony. So thank you for being here and watching this series. I hope that you get something out of it. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Alisha Brasher here at Cosmic Gateway, and I'm joined by Tony Rodrigues. If you haven't watched part 1, Tony talks about a lot of different tools and techniques of working with memory, subconscious mind, short-term memory, long-term memory, connecting with emotion, setting intention, and to recall through dream space or to recall memories. Tony also talks about different categories from his research and his work, where he's dived into not only unpacking his own personal journey, but also helping support other people, and through that creating a bigger picture and finding the different pieces of the puzzle so that we can have a greater overview perspective of what these different secret space program as a broader title look like in terms of smaller categories and how they interact with one another. So welcome back, Tony. Thank you for being here.
Hi, glad to be back.
So I guess I have a lot of questions, and I don't even know if I can formulate them correctly, and I don't expect you to have all the answers, but there's a lot of curiosity. And so I want to go back to the beginning in terms of what originally happens when people get taken into a 20-year and back, or one of many 20-year and back processes. Generally there's some sort of an abduction or an experience, and then they're gone for 20 years and then put back in, and hours have passed, but it's actually many years, and that's very hard for us humans to get our minds around, because we're not talking in linear process. But I'm curious to know from your vantage point or perspective, because I know you mentioned in the first interview how it happened, I think, in the early 90s for you, and then
80s.
80s, sorry. in the early 80s, and how throughout that period of time, throughout your life, you were starting to have memory bleed through, come through. Do you feel as though I want to come back. Sorry, there's 2 questions burning now. I've got to get one out before the other. Do you feel like there is some sort of a timeline that plays out down here in this reality, the human Tony that's functioning, working, raising a family, and trying to earn a living? And then there's another aspect of your consciousness that is in a similar timeline, experiencing those things at the same time, and that's where the energetic bleed through comes through.
Yes.
Okay.
So, wow. Okay. Yeah. You put that great. Okay. And this is the most common question. So, number one, I always hear the most common question is, where were his parents while he was gone for 20 years and then they put him back? And what they're not realizing is that really I was gone. I wasn't gone for long. I went to bed. My mom put me to bed on Thursday night. In April of 82. And Friday morning, that following morning, she said, Tony, get up, it's time to go to school. And I got up out of bed, and I had been gone for 20 years. So it's right. So that 20 years happened, and they put me back. There's a time travel component, consciousness component, you can get a surgery on a body part and you have no idea what happened to the surgery. So that was kind of what happened to me. So I'm speculating. I'll make it clear. I'm speculating on the A, B, and C of it all. But I was gone for the 20 years, and I was returned just a few minutes later. My parents had no idea what happened. I had no idea what happened. I was changed though. Overnight, I was a different person. I was a 10-year-old kid. I was cocky and funny on one side, and the next morning I woke up and I was reserved and calm. And, you know, thankful. I was very thankful to be where I was. So there was that. The consciousness part of it. So the other thing that I will say is that I experienced the 20 years in space first. So in my mind, when I think back of when it happened, it's all one line to me. So in when I look back in my memory, in my mind, and whatever, you can do with this what you will, it's one line. I lived from 0 to 10, and then I lived the 20 years in space in that program and with no memory of what was going on. And then I was put back with my original memories back in 1982. And then I lived that till now. And that's, so it's like I was 0 to 10, then I lived for 20 years, and then I was put back and lived those. So that's how I experienced my memory. For me to remember 11 years old is a short time. And for me to remember 9 years old is much, much, much farther in my distant past to me. That's what it feels like for today, right now. So during that time, I absolutely 100% believe that I could have met myself, that there were two of me. And that's why I've introduced the theory of cloning. I believe that they cloned me. They took my consciousness out, put it in the clone, and it lived for 20 years. And when they put it back in time a few minutes later, so imagine my body was on a table with no consciousness in it for 30 minutes, and the clone lived, and then they put it back in time and killed it. They just kill it. And then my consciousness returns to that body without the memories, and those memories of my life are still there. And I woke up and everything was fine, and I went back to my life, but I was different because, you know, really, you never forget anything. Your soul is, I think that there's a lot of actually science behind it, that memory is not stored locally. There's a lot of people that have, brain tumors and such. They have chunks of memory, childhood memory gone, but they still recover the memories later. Like there's people that have brain tissue removed, and that memory that's stored there locally is their age 8 to 10, and they don't have any memory, but over time they recover the memories, which would suggest the memory is stored somewhere else, either elsewhere in the body or elsewhere outside of it. So that's how the experience was for me, and that led me to believe in the cloning. And I was referred, and also I was called the clone many times. They referred to me as a clone. So I thought that they were lying to them, the human program and Inyo and they said, you guys are clones. He told us that. And I think the consciousness, this is something about human cloning that we need to, it's strange to me that they made it illegal as fast as they did without any knowledge of it when they invented it back in I think it was like late 90s or early 2000s. They cloned that sheep. Yeah, they immediately made human cloning illegal. But I think this is a byproduct of it. I think the ET species have been doing it a long time. I think it's a form of life extension. And it's not going anywhere, and it's a secret, and they're keeping it for themselves. So there's that. That's exactly, I think, what I felt. And I also I think there's more than one way to do it. The 20 year and then back in time. I think that there are several different technologies, because witnesses come up with different versions of their of their experience. There's a lot of people that experience something, they've come forward, and their version of it is way different. So
yeah, I think that's the part that's always intrigued me, and the way that I've seen it through some people's experiences is that when they have their trauma or they had their abduction, there is a part of their consciousness that is taken from them in that moment, whether that's then put into a clone body or it's taken into more of an astral space. Sometimes there's not great words to describe these things. And I think,
there's never is.
I want to create a whole new dictionary, but that's going on the back burner, space dictionary. But I feel like in some people's experience, when they're in their human day-to-day, there is a large portion of their consciousness that is functioning elsewhere for the period of time that they are in those programs. And so I guess what I want to ask you, just to kind of get into more specifics, is like, do you feel, or during those years, like up until 2015, do you feel like there was an aspect of you missing? Does that
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny, I just wrote it down 50-50. I've explained it like this, and this is also what the experience was like. Excuse me. I was prior to being taken, I was an outstanding student in school. So I'm going to toot my own horn. I was in the top 5% of schools. I was a straight A student. I had set records on the SAT in school, or not the SAT, but in testing, third grade. Back then, I broke records for the school. I was very smart. After I was taken in 82 in fourth grade, it was the end of the school year. And I just kind of mailed that in. And the following year, I was D's and E's until I eventually dropped out of school. I was very emotionally damaged. I was somebody that I'm very, very not proud of. I could never have a relationship. People couldn't understand it. All my friends were like, Tony, nothing's wrong with you, but why can't you keep a girlfriend? I was an emotional wreck. I was an emotionally very insecure, very damaged person emotionally. And so I never had any relationships for more than a few weeks because girls would get freaked out by me. I'm still kind of weird, right? But girls would get freaked out with me, and it would never work out. And I had a hard time being on time. I had a hard time putting together things. Like, I was kind of a mess. I was not a good, I was not outstanding. So then it was around the year 2000. So about 18 years from 82 to 2000, about 18 years. So this is kind of a detail. I'll try to explain as best I can, but I'm just being truthful rather than leave out a complicated thing to make the story go. But right around 2000, there was a day, and I was renting. I was in an apartment, and I woke up in bed. I woke up in the morning, and I felt like I sat up on bed and I went, it's over. It's over. I kept saying it over and over again. It's over. It's over. I was doing stuff like this, like looking at my head, like, it's over. And I felt like $1 million. I cleaned my room. I changed my career. I met my wife within 6 months and stayed with her for a very long time. I changed everything. I got back together. In other words, to answer your question, yes, my psyche, it was really on an emotional level, the emotional baggage, but my psyche changed, my habits changed, everything changed. When there were two of me, and it was like, and I say it like this, I was using a bucket of water analogy back in other interviews. I said, it's like somebody had a 5-gallon bucket of my consciousness, and they poured 2.5 gallons in both of us. But that's not it. It's more like a beam of light, and they hit it with a prism, and then the beam went to two sources and lit those up half as bright. And then when the other one died, I got all the light back and I became brighter. And that is exactly what it felt like. Whether that's the case, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I don't know it all, man. I'm the first to say that. But everything that I've called out, a lot of things I called out have panned out. And so that's why I keep talking about it. But it was as if I were a bright kid and my light got split between two prisms, or two targets, and I became less bright. And at the end of it all, and back to the 18-year mark, I just want to explain, this is the complicated part. Our ship was known to do anti-telephoning missions. It was a safety measure. The ship would leave at 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning on series time, which is a 20-hour day. We'd leave at 8 a.m. and we would get back at 8 a.m. We would go for 8 and 12 hours out into space, but we would come back at 8 a.m. because they would cancel the mission. We'd come back at 5 minutes before 8 a.m. and we traveled time, and we were 5 minutes away, so they could see the ship physically appear. And if the ship did not appear, they would cancel the mission, and because it was lost. And so they would cancel the mission and we wouldn't lose the ship. It's hard to get your head around. But I did the math on this on a 5-day work week with 8 to 10 hour days. I did the math, and it'd be about 6 years of flights like that would add up to 2 years off of my time. So I was gone for 20 years. But in Earth time from 82 to 2000, because of those flights cutting off a day every day, or 8 hours every day of time, I lived 20 years length, but it was 18 years here, and the math works. I went back and kind of did the numbers a few years back, and it did work out that way. So
fascinating. So speaking to the feeling emotionally vulnerable, damaged, not being able to get things to work in your life, having struggles in that way, do you feel like because it's a shared experience, you're the original host of your consciousness? Do you think that that was bleeding through to making you feel that way in this reality?
Absolutely. So, and this is a phenomenon that it's not only what I remember, so I remember the feelings of it all, but this is something that I've discovered in other people as well. And it's actually common that I will talk with people and they started outlining what they went through, and they'll say, you know, I saw this and I remember this, and they hit me with all these memories. And I say, well, when did that happen? And they go, I don't know. And I say, well, how old do you think you were in that memory? And they go, I don't know, maybe 20. And I go, I look for an intake event. And, you know, I look, so when does this all start? And they go, I was 7 and I saw a gray at the end of my driveway and there was lights in the sky. And I go, okay. And I remember being taken, and there's a man in the military came to my school and blah, blah, blah. So I look at that. When did that happen? And they go, I don't know, maybe here. And then I roll the clock forward and I go, well, I add 20 years to that date. So they go, this happened in 1990. And I go, what happened in 2010? And they go, wait a minute, what? I said, tell me what happened in 2010. They go, oh, well, for starters, I got a divorce and I changed my job and I moved to a new house and I started working with the charity group that I'm in now, and I started doing this. And they there's always a life change in the 20-year mark. Time and time again, I see it all the time. And so this is something I look for, is that behavior change. Their behavior, when they get taken, there's a behavior change, but they're often too young to know the difference because they're young. But then I add 20 years to that moment that they're taken and go, what happened there? And there's always a behavior change. Usually for the positive, because it's the same thing. The light is being redirected
back in. It's almost like, becoming back whole and complete, whereas there's a large portion of you that's missing.
Yes, like on a mental level, like on an emotional mental level.
Yeah. And so were you having bleed through dreams in that 18-year period?
Sometimes they were during the day. Sometimes they were waking dreams. Sometimes they were in the dream space, like right before I woke up, and I wake up and go, whoa, what is that? That can't be. And when I look back on it, so this is going to really be freaky. I'm gonna tell you this.
Bring it.
I don't talk about this often. This is going to be really freaky for you and anybody listening. But I would have, like when I was 17, for instance, and what I found was that it was kind of like twins. You know how twins report? One of them breaks his arm, you know, far away, 3-hour drive down the road, and he falls and breaks his arm, and the other twin immediately feels a panic and runs in, are you okay? Like they know. It was like that. So when something bad happened, or good, because I did fall in love while I was up there, and there were good things that happened to me too. When something like that happened, I would feel the emotion of it. I would just slump into a depression down here sometimes and not know why. But here's the freaky part that'll blow your mind, is when I went back and I looked at events in my life, and I'm gonna keep this vague. But when I looked at events in my life that kept reoccurring and I couldn't understand why, every 10 months or every 12 months, you know, this would happen again. When I went back one day, I was doodling, and I often go and look and see where Ceres is at in orbit. There's a planetarium program, and I always take a peek and see where they're at. You know, it's like my old home. But when I started going back in time, the program lets you adjust the time. The times that I were having these bleed through, Ceres was in opposition to the Earth. When it was close to the Earth was when I was getting the bleed through memories. Like you get what I'm saying? And when we're on Ceres, they always would say on the news, we're in opposition to Earth. We don't care. The citizens of Earth don't care when we're in opposition of Ceres. But the citizens of Ceres, it's a news event. It's newsworthy because they know they came from the Earth, and they go, we're in opposition. We're as close as we can be to Jupiter, or we're as close as we can be to Earth right now for the next 30 days. And so that was we knew back then. So me, when I was there, was thinking of myself on the Earth at that time. And that's when I was getting bleed through memories on the earth. So I don't talk about that often, but I've found that that lines up. There's actually a great deal when I do my timeline work for myself, I go back, that lines up.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You yet again given me a valuable piece of the puzzle. That makes so much sense to me, because when I look at my own timeline and my own journey, there are peaks in like a lot of energetic bleed through. And I had this experience because in the coming back for me, it was the Arcturians that came through to me, and that was a whole life change experience. And every time I go through what I call like a big sort of up leveling in my consciousness and my energy, I check the placement of Arcturus, and it's always closest to Earth.
Wow. So yeah, it's the same thing. And you know, I look at it too. When I start hearing my friends all tell me, man, I woke up at 3 a.m. last night. I'm right on that star, the planetarium going, where were we pointing at? Where was the Earth pointing at 3 a.m. that everybody had to wake up? What's going on out there? And I never get a real answer, but I'm always kind of the mind that, and this is not astrology. It's the reality of the situation is that we give off, you are like a radio unit. And when you think, you're giving off signals of those thoughts into the universe that go very far. And the science is that while they will disperse over distances, they are still travel great distances. So there are many other phenomena. I'm just saying, like, mental thought works like that. So we could be picking up things from elsewhere that we have no idea what it is, that we all just tune into. People the human mind is amazing, and we're just beginning to realize it, So I always look for coincidences like that. That's just how I think now that I've realized that everything's BS. I'm always looking for the what's under everything.
Do you notice any sort of correlation between major life events that may have happened and impacted you physically that happened to bleed through energetically into this reality? Like, say for example, if you had an accident at work and you got burnt, or you put out your back, or you like something very physical and tangible that would have happened while you were up there in Ceres Colony.
There was a time I was injured up there, and I believe I broke my arm at the same time down here. So yes, I do believe that, absolutely, that there's a synchronicity. There's some strange synchronicity about that. Another phenomenon that this is not talked about a lot, but the people in the space program are fully aware of this. So imagine this. So you're in Australia. I'm in the United States, right? So I'm in the United States and you're in Australia. The odds of us bumping into each other at the pizza shop are pretty nil, right? So I'm never going to know you in our regular life without the internet and without the subject matter that we've agreed upon today. I would never know you. I would never meet you. That, you get what I'm saying? So if we knew each other in space, if I was in space and I knew you, and then all of a sudden you thought, man, I'm going to go to Mexico. And then all of a sudden I go, I got to go to Mexico. I'm going to go to Mexico. And we went there and bumped into each other and hit it off and not know what, man, you're so familiar to me. So this is a phenomenon that's actually common for people that have served in the space programs, especially lovers. People that were in love up there tend to find each other again randomly down here. It's a phenomenon they can't really explain why, but it's the truth. A lot of people get their memories back because they were in love. There's a love component. So people that served in the space programs tend to randomly find each other down here. And so that means that there's a lot of influence on each other. That's part of the technology, and it's hard for us to unpack it when the technology is still classified and secret. Like they're aware of this all, but that's the truth.
That goes a lot into my work, and I want, if you're open to talking about that a little bit more, do you feel like, I'm going to have a couple of questions now. Do you feel like there is a soul agreement in terms of the lovers that do connect up there and then find each other down here as a catalyst of an activation to remember?
So it could be, so like I said, a lot of the agreements that we do subconsciously happen and they're secret. I mean, we have no idea, no memory. And when we agree to not remember it, then we won't. But I think in my experience, I found a handful of people that I knew up there, and they found me. And I believe that there's a bit of quantum entanglement with relationships of people. So in other words, so think about like this, two people meet, they can give each other a great deal of benefit. So that's what friends are. Friends really benefit each other, even if it's just by being in their presence. You know, when you're with a best friend, you're kind of happy and the day goes well. And it's an energy thing. It's an energy exchange. You're both good for each other. So when you're done being friends, because you've grown into another direction, this is part of the process. There's nothing wrong with it. But one day you grow up and you go, well, you're with your best friend and you go, well, I had kids now. They need me more than you. We kind of slowly get. I'll call you Friday. You know, and I'll call you next time. Then you don't, and then you go on about your way. It's a natural process of that energy spike when you're together is made because you're both getting something. But then when it's time to go, you go. So what happens is people are friends in these programs, and they don't get to grow apart properly. They get torn apart. At the end of all of a sudden on Tuesday, you're going back. Your 20 years is up. And I'm still friends. I still have my friends. So there's an energetic, there's a quantum entanglement of that energy of there. So that's the quantum entanglement is there. You still have it. You still have the connection with your friends. All of them, actually, probably. And there's a quantum entanglement there. So when you come back here, that entanglement is still searching for that friend. On your little helper in the back of your mind, your subconscious mind is always looking like, where is John? Where is my buddy? So that's what happens, and that's what it felt like when I found people. Is as soon as you come across the ability to find them, you go, wait a minute, there's somebody I know here, and it goes, and there's a connection there. It's because I don't think it's 100% like when I say mental, I mean purposeful thinking. Like a conscious thought is a thought that you're thinking of, like, I need to find a friend today. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, like you said, on a soul agreement, but I don't think it's a soul agreement. I think it's an energy. I think it's just a way that energy disperses, between souls that happens. And so people find each other.
And do you think that there's a prevention for souls not finding each other? Like,
like I said,
there's both ways. Do you think that there's
a natural agreement of when it's time to not be as close friends anymore? We're not close friends anymore, and we move on because of growth, because life is a never-ending grow. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're never sitting still in life ever. It feels like you might be, but you are in fact growing or dying. We're all dying, really. A friend of mine was an oncologist, and he said we're all dying, just very slowly. He's like, you are decomposing, in fact, right now. Just very, very slowly. He's like, when you die, the rate will pick up very quick when you actually stop breathing. But right now you are decomposing. And I thought, he was so morbid guy, but it was like funny how he said it. But it's true. We're changing. We're changing. Like, all the cells in your body are new every like 11 years or something. I'm probably wrong at that, but basically every cell in your body has been copied every 11 years. So your body right now didn't even exist 12 years ago. It was a copy. You are a copy of that person. Your soul still resides inside that hard drive. That's copy, you know what I mean? So you change like that. Your friendship changes, your needs change, your life changes, everything changes. And if what I'm saying is, I think in these programs, people get ripped apart, so they don't naturally grow apart. And that's why the refriending happens in whatever way. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm being off on a tangent, but that's my theory. That's my theory.
So, Tony, you may not be able to answer this, but from a soul level, consciousness level, why do you think you went into some of these programs and had these experiences? Are you privy to that? Do you think it was a pre-incarnation agreement from your consciousness? Do you feel like it was something that was already in motion before you came into this world? I know that you have spoken once on an interview about your parents not being able to have children, then all of a sudden you were born or conceived, and what we kind of know a little bit more about technology and hybridization and things like that. Do you think that there was something going on? I don't know. I'm throwing out some questions here.
Right, big questions. That's a big one. So there have been some things that have come to light in the last year that, you know, in the beginning, it felt like I just got my memories back, that I was a victim, that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was victimized and taken into a program illegally and then abused and then sold back to a legal program and then furtherly abused because that's how it was arranged, and then lived and then put back. And tough luck, kid. And through a random circumstance of grace that my record was deleted and they didn't give me because they knew I'd remember, and they didn't give me a lobotomy. So I slipped through the cracks many times. So I have to believe that there's no way I could be sitting here talking to you about all this stuff if I didn't have some form of help from elsewhere. So I do believe that. What it is, I can't say. Actually, I do talk about it. It is the subject matter of my second book.
Okay. Well, you don't have to give too much away.
So you're right. I'll save it for the book. For that being said, I have my own theories on reasons why I went through what I went through. I do have the feeling, so I want to say this in a way that people can understand rather than, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense, because it takes a lot to explain how I arrived at these conclusions. But needless to say, during the flights to Peru, when I was in Peru, when they would drug me and put me under, I experienced quite a bit of things like in a hypnotic state or a subconscious state, whatever. I was traveling. I did there's a lot of memory that doesn't make sense there. I believe that I had a karmic debt, and rather than pay the debt off over several lifetimes, I said, let's just pay it all right now. Throw the book at me, and I'd rather just pay it off right now rather than pay it a little bit at a time. I'd rather just suck it up and live through the pain of what I went through karmically. Like, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, but I kind of feel like I chose a faster payment plan karmically. So I went through all those terrible things in the book and all these terrible things, and I kind of now I've paid off my debt, and life is starting to be really good to me lately. You know, now that I look at my life, I kind of feel like, you know, I'm not that old, I'm 50, but I'm like, it's really turning around, and I think, wow, you know, it's just getting good and it's going to be over soon. And, you know, I wish I was this lucky back in my 20s, but things have been very good for me recently. And I believe that I had a karmic debt and that I went through I volunteered to go through, you know, be pre-incarnation and volunteered to go through all these things, to be a witness and help out others that are doing this at a time, and paid off a debt. And so now I am free. Like, I feel very, at the same time, getting the book out was a very liberating achievement for me. So I feel like I'm a person that thinks that, you know, I would always ask myself, how am I going to feel when I'm dying about this, what I'm doing now? Like, I believe that you see your whole life again. And when you die, you see your life flashes before you, and you look back on the things that you screwed up and you're embarrassed about and you regret. And I always told myself, if I don't tell people about this, I'll regret it. And if I don't get this book done, I'll regret this. If I died tomorrow and my book's not done, I would sit there and hate myself. I would hate my life. And so when I got the book done and I got it out there and I got all this stuff, and now I tell myself, like, if I died today, I'd be cool with it. You know, I'm cool. I really got everything done that I had to. You know, everything else now is just fun, is gravy. And so that's kind of literally how I feel. And I think everybody should live their life judging like that. If you were to die at this in 5 minutes from now, and I hope you don't. Everybody, and I'm saying this to everybody listening, please, I hope you wish you love life, a long life, long loving life. If you were to die in 5 minutes, would you regret something, or would you look back and feel complete? And so if you have a regret about something, you better get working, buddy, because it ain't going to be long. You're going to be having that talk with yourself. We all will. We all do. So that was something that was my motivator, because when I first went public, I did it against the advice of literally everybody in my life. Everybody said, what are you doing? You better shut up. Don't tell anybody about this. You're crazy, Tony. They're going to lock you up. And I did it anyway, because I knew that there's no way I could take it all to the grave. I did not want to be laying on my deathbed and go, wait, I was in space. There's a colony out there. You know, I didn't want to do that. And so I had to get it off my chest, and it was therapy to talk about it. So anyhow.
Thank you so much for I think that there's so much resonance there with my own journey. I won't go into that, but I know that feeling of like, I cannot live with this. It has to come out, as crazy as it sounds. And everyone around you opposing that and just saying, don't go there. You're the crazy one, you know. Not always easy.
Well, you know, I don't take it as literal. I don't say this as a literal sense, but everybody is living in a different reality. Your reality is quite different than mine. Like I have no access to Vegemite.
I'll send you some and then you will.
No, it's okay. I've had it. No, but what I'm saying is your reality, really, your world. I've been to Australia. It's beautiful. I loved it there, but it's radically different than where I live. The street lights, the street shapes, the land, the weather, the people, everything is different. It's a different reality where you're at. It is. And it's a different reality where I'm at. And for millions of other people, it's completely different. You look at people, you know, it's another world for a lot of people, but that's in a literal sense. But I think in another sense, that reality is different for us, each of us too. So that's why we kind of flock together. People that listen to this show kind of flock together, because our reality, they're aware that these things are real, but people right next to you that think that this show is crazy are living in a different vibration, like a reality. Their reality is different, and so leave them to it. That's fine. But you're giving this information out for people that are living in our reality, which allows for these things to not be crazy. And so that's important, man. It's because there's actually quite a bit of us.
Yeah, there sure is. I have 3 questions. Every time you say
something,
you're
still coming out with new ones. Is that what's going on?
I'm sorry.
On a question treadmill. Okay, yeah, I'm not complaining. I like them.
I want to talk about 2 parts. I want to talk about why you were selected or detected as a child. Like, was there an incident where you came into some sort of psychic ability, or your energy sort of emulated a frequency that was picked up or detected? And I'm talking from a very earth level, not from a soul perspective. Was there incidents that occurred which, I mean, you said that you were very smart as a child, that might go into it, but did you have natural orientation to psychic abilities, and was that then utilized and enhanced through the programs?
Wow, neat question. Never been asked that before, but it does run in our family. The kids, my daughter, up until the age of like 2, when she was 2 to 4, was extremely precognitive. I mean extreme. Like, it was a daily occurrence where we would all sit around and go, wow. And we wanted to ask, it's so much so that we were checking when we wanted to shop for a new TV set. We would go ask my daughter, my 2-year-old, you think we should get a TV set? Because she had great it was amazing. And then it went away. At about 4 years old, it just went away. And it was the same for me, I guess. The reason I got selected in the programs is because I was in the talented and gifted. I was in an advanced learning class with a kid whose dad was in the programs, and I didn't like him, and I pissed him off. And he pointed me out to his dad, and the next day I was taken. It was a spiteful thing. So it was the wrong place at the wrong time. There are people among us that have absolutely every bit of memory back from going through these things, and they are part of these programs, and they have numbers to call for when they have problems. And there's a society among us that is fully aware and living in the wake of these programs cognitively, and they've been paid paychecks, and so if they speak about it, they'd have to pay it back plus go to jail, so they never will speak about it. And so I went to school with people like that, and I made one of them very angry at me. And so as a punishment, they took me into the program. They needed bodies. And here we are, years later. Energetically, I don't know, man. What's been, I'd like to think that I haven't been messed with since, which has been nice. So, but who knows? I think that maybe they would just do a better job at blocking my memory, now.
Do you think that runs into, speaking about like potentially your psychic abilities or intuitive abilities, or just the fact that your daughter has it? Do you think that is running in the genetics that they look for?
Absolutely. I think there's a level of development that, firstly, okay, I believe that there's a great deal of equality between all people. And I believe that things that are horrible disadvantages are also profound advantages in everybody. So when somebody has a disadvantage, I don't feel bad for them, because I know that they probably have an advantage somewhere else that I'm unaware of. So that being said, when I look at people and I don't agree with the way that their lifestyle, people that are, let's say somebody that's intensely selfish, or let's do this one. This is a good one. Someone that's an atheist, okay, versus somebody with great faith in religion. They both are limited by what they believe, and they're both freed by what so that, in other words, the atheist doesn't have to look over his shoulder. He doesn't think that there's this almighty, this eye watching him do all his action. He's got complete freedom of movement and throughout his life. An atheist is like, I'm just going to go skinny dipping. I don't care. There's no God, and I'm do whatever I want. And so they have a freedom, but they also have the disadvantage of not having that faith in other moments. The person that's religious is like, I would never go skinny dipping. I'm not trying to sin, because I want my life to be on the up and up. So they have the advantage of that behavior and the faith, but they also don't have the freedom that the atheist has. So you get what I'm saying? They both have advantages and disadvantages. And I think that's how everything is across the board. So, people being taken into the programs, I think it's the same thing. And the psychic ability, like if you have the ability, some people have psychic ability, it's a great advantage, but they also have empathy that comes with it by being in touch with other living beings. You're psychically, so you can scan you can feel other living things, which means you're empathetic. So if they're suffering, you also feel that. Like, you want to walk through a hospital on your day off, in your spare time, do you want to go walking down by the ICU? Because you can feel everybody's pain as you go down the hallway. But people that don't feel that, it's also an advantage, because they can practice medicine. People that don't have that are in tune with other people, they can do it as a job. They can cut somebody open, and because they don't have the empathy, and we need them. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's
100%.
That's how I feel. So yes. So I believe these programs are looking for both. So they're looking for, I think they have X amount of chairs. They need people with empathic ability. We need empaths. We need 100 of them. And so boom, that's when you're getting caught for that. Then they need soldiers. We need people that are not empathic. We need people that are, I don't know the word for it, what I'd use, but they need people that are not empathic. Let's go. We need 200 of those. Better go get them. And they just profile you, and they take what they need. That's what I believe.
Do you think that there is technology that is utilized that enhances those abilities? And what am I trying to say here? I don't want to give too much away from what I've started to see in my session, so I'm trying to word it in a way that doesn't give it away. But do you think that there is some sort of technology that can switch off being connected to human emotions to be able to go through some of the more traumatic experiences?
Oh yeah. So there's a lot of drugs that they can get administered that'll take you right out of, without saying this, I'm not touching a hot button subject. When I was a child, I would often have dreams of seeing my friends. I'm talking about very, very young. I had full colored dreams. My mom didn't believe it. And I had dreams of hanging out with my friends, and they were very profound, very awesome, best thing ever. I would wake up every morning feeling great. And then I got a round of vaccines, and my dreams went to black and white, and I never saw those. I never had those dreams again. So there was something taken from that treatment. There was something that happened. Fast forward to what I said earlier about the cleanses that we do. It turns out that for psychic ability, doing a metal cleanse is very important, because you've got a collection of basically low quality metals in you. When you need iron and you need metals in you, but you're clustered with aluminum and your tinfoil, your pop can, and you get plastics in there, phthalates from using plastics. So your body's holding on to all these micro pollutants in you. So we do a cleanse, and then we do the Ethereum. The gold is actually increases, your electric conductivity of your body. So that it greatly enhances everybody's ability. The binaural thing, the hemisync, also enhances that. Most people feel it immediate. I say, how did it work? Tell me yes or no. And everybody's like, yes, I could tell. So, your cleansing is weird, and there's no doubt we're being poisoned on purpose to keep us not being psychic. So, that's touches on another conspiracy, the fluoride debate. So when you look at it, why, if they're going to add fluoride to our water for our teeth, why aren't they adding vitamin C? Why aren't they adding all these other things? Why aren't they adding iron? Why not put iron in our water? We all need iron. We all don't get enough of it. Why not put baseline B12? Why not put other minerals? Why just fluoride? What does that do? Because it calcifies your pineal gland and nerfs your psychic ability, because they don't want you being able to remote view the kind of out cold crap that they're up to. So wow, I'm on a soapbox. Basically.
No, thank you, Tony. We all need to hear that or reinforce that in some way. All right, I promise 2 more questions.
Okay.
I could probably talk to you all day in 5 questions. Yeah. What happens to people and their relationships with others while they're in the 20 and back, in their human form? Do you think that
down here?
Huh?
Down here.
Down here, yeah. Do you think that there is a reason why you couldn't connect and having proper human connection or relationships?
Well, okay, so that for me is not common. It does happen to other people, but I was greatly abused. So the other form of my consciousness, which I was in touch with, was being abused badly. So I was shouldering the trauma. So there's 2 of me. One of me had an okay life that had ups and downs, normal teenager, and the other one was having trauma. I was being raped and beaten and put in combat and seeing things, being very badly traumatized. So that trauma that I carried during the trauma, it is not when it hurts. It's in the months after the trauma when you go, what happened? Why me? It's that time. And I was sharing that for months and months and months afterward. That's where the real cost was. So that was just in my case. There's a lot of people that are in these programs that they do see trauma, but it's not on that level, and it comes in a different package. And so they are very functioning, and some people can probably weather it better than me or worse. But it's different for everybody, so it's not like that's the case for everybody.
I always say through my work is that trauma is trauma, and we almost are these energetic sponges of consciousness that work through us, and there's many streams of that consciousness working and operating in different realities, can be. And so if our consciousness has experienced a trauma, whether it be through a shared consciousness through a clone, whether it be through a past life, whether it be through that, when it comes to the surface, it's still a trauma that we have to process. No matter when along the timeline it occurred, it's still, I'm trying to find the word for it.
It's just as important.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've had people that reach out to me and they want to compare their own trauma. They read my story and they go, man, you went through this. And I say, look, it's not a contest. Okay. Number one,
it's relative. Yeah.
It's relative. Exactly. One kid can grow up in a multi-million-dollar home with a wealthy family, be well fed, well taken care of, well dressed, never see a rainy day. And another kid can grow up in poverty and get beaten and hurt and broken and be unhealthy and be traumatized. But that one kid in the wealthy family get yelled at by the wrong person a few times in a row. They are both traumatized, and one is not greater than the other. What it is they've reached a threshold of disappointment. I don't want to make a joke of it, but they've reached a threshold where where their life is no longer what they want it to be, and it's something else. They've crossed a threshold of trauma, and one is not worse than the other. They're both just as the mind has to deal with it the same exact way. And a lot of people, I get that. This is the worst thing. I don't want to say the worst thing, but it's one of the things that concerns me the most is that people want to brand, or they'll read my story and somehow think that their trauma is not important. Like, you went through so much more, and I've only been through this and that. It's okay. I'm like, no, listen, you had trauma. You need to give it the respect that it deserves. You're hurt, that you're hurting.
Yeah.
And one girl wrote me, and she said, I don't see how you do it. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I was raped when I was in college, and ever after I've used it to beat people up. She said, I use it as an excuse. I'm always reminding people of it. I always say, well, I use it as an excuse to beat men up, to beat people up at her workplace. I don't deserve this. I was raped once. And she used it as a defense, because she never really worked through the trauma. She only used the trauma as a tool. And she said, I don't see how you do it. You went through so much worse. It makes me feel like nothing now after reading what you went through. And I go, firstly, it's not a contest, really, to see that I got worse than you. I'm worse off than you are. It's not a contest, because it's equally not a contest to think that I'm better off than you, right? So it's about your own, where you're at and where you're going. And I said, secondly, you had trauma. I was like, you don't, just because somebody was punched in the face twice doesn't mean that you getting punched in the face once was okay, right? So it's, you know what I mean? So one person gets multiple punches in the face, one person gets one punch in the face. They both got punched. The person threw the punches in trouble. Like, there's trauma. You need to sort this out. You both need healing. And I kind of went with that. And that was when I really realized that people do equate it like it's a contest, and it's definitely not. I read something the other day that was like almost life-changing for me. It's not about the person with the most wealth. It's the person that needs the least is the wealthiest. The wealthiest person is the one that needs the least. It's not about who has the most things, because a lot of people with a lot of things are very, very lacking in their lifestyle. They're missing a lot. And so that was like very traumatic and very profound to me. And I think that the trauma thing is like that. When you have trauma, no matter what it was, no matter what level it was, mom yelling at you, or, you know what I'm saying, being kidnapped, whatever on the scale, it leaves you needing something. The trauma is a need there. You have something and it has to be addressed. So
thank you, Tony. Thank you. And I think that's a really key component to addressing in these, is that it's about the personalized experience, the personal journey, and how we can heal from that, work with that to make something of it, so that we can better ourselves and then better our relationships, our connections, our interactions, and not being the victim of a bad circumstance that happened. I think the hero's journey, or the personalized, is to be able to go through experience, to go to the depths, to really understand the resilience of the human spirit. And I think that you're a perfect example of that. And I just want to thank you for, being so open and honest, and to be able to share your heart on your sleeve, and to share all your facts and findings. And I think that that's a true inspiration, hopefully, for many who might be watching in this, that might be at the beginning of their journey and starting to have this awareness that, hang on, there's something going on here that I don't fully understand. And I think you've addressed so many key aspects that might give people those tools to start to unpack that process. So I have one more question. Sorry. Actually, I have 16 more, but I'll say.
Some of my answers are pretty long, so I think I only have a little bit of time for. Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, what would you say if okay, sorry, it's a two-part question. Do you see that there are correlations of massive people returning from a 20 and back all at once? Like, do you see an upswing in a whole bunch of people come kind of returning and starting to retrieve memory? Does that happen in clusters and groups?
It seems random. So it seems like people that were taken in. So from what I gather from talking to other researchers, I'm a big fan of Dr. Michael Salla. He's got a lot of great books. The Space Force book he wrote in particular really details a lot of the funding behind Black projects and how the low Earth secret space program got started. Okay. And it's very important. It's very important information for people to understand that, to see where we're at now, because the funding always keeps coming up. People, where's the money for all this stuff? Where's all this? Right. So he details that. For what he uncovered was that right at about 1980, that these Black projects, there was a secret space program in the 60s. They captured, the CIA took the Gemini program away. And they took the Gemini, and then NASA went into the Apollo program, but the CIA continued to put people in orbit with the Gemini, with the, I forget what the rocket, but anyhow, the Gemini program, the military took it and it was secret. And during that time, it expanded, it started to expand. But from the 60s to 70s, they only had a shoestring budget. They only had so much money. In the late 70s to 1980, their budget went from millions to billions. So it really expanded. So we had a lot more people in the early 80s being taken. That's when they had a lot of empty chairs up there, and they began to take everybody in the 80s. So in clusters, the early 80s is actually the golden era of abduction into the 20 and back programs. That being said, they were also putting it together for the first time. And so they did not do as good of a job deleting everybody. They bungled it. They were more prone to make mistakes in the process than they are now. So people that are taken in the 80s, there's a lot of people in the 80s, and there's a lot of them with their memories, with a great deal of memories. People that are in the 90s, 90, 95 that are taken, that are starting to get their memories now, have much more, what do you call it? Blurry memories. Like, they got better at deleting their memories later on. So that's kind of what I see. And then as far as like being taken in, I think that it's random. I think that it's every day. I think that they don't take 1,000 people on, they don't take 10,000 people on December 1st. Okay. I think they take 1,000 people a month for all the time. It's an intake system. They can take X amount of people a night, and it keeps going 24/7. That they have like a factory set up for that abducts people and puts them into this program. That way they always have a steady stream of bodies. So as the needs change, they can kind of adapt their resources, and they always have a kind of a like a projection of how many people they'll have and when. So they don't go out and take everybody at once. They take everybody, it's an ongoing thing, however many it is a night. Probably 500 people a night or something like. There's 50,000 UFO sightings a year globally. That's quite a bit. Yeah.
So do you think there's a returning cluster that happens? So not so much being taken, but the return cluster.
So there's a hunch that I have that when you die out there, you just return to your body. And so some people will, if they die, they'll come back at the same time with another group that comes back. But no, I don't think that. I think that the return process is the same part of an industry. I think it's an industrial thing. It's kind of like car production. They don't make all the cars in January for the year. They make them throughout the year, and they're labeled that year. Do you get what I mean by that? I think it's like that. It's a factory that keeps running, and they take people and put them in, and they got people, they put them back, and it's a factory.
I'm going to throw a real curveball.
No, you're not.
Do you think that there is a higher intelligence that may work around the timing of it? Only because I have intuitive hunches, and then like you, I'll get a hunch and then I go in and research it, and then I'm like, and I like to put the data together and go, hang on, there's a pattern here. And I feel like there's an astrological component. And when I say that, you're smiling. There is a thing called a Saturn return that happens to people around the age of 28 to 32. And I think it's a 20-year transit. I don't know. I'm not an astrologer. I'm starting to look at the correlation. But there are 20-year transits of different planets. And so it correlates there is like one transit that happens with, in particular, Saturn around the age of like 7 and 8 years old, around 8 to 9. So there's a window period there. And then you move it forward 20 years, and then there's around 30. And then there's another transit that happens around 40. Do you think that I'm just throwing it out there. Do you think there's a possibility that
there's a phenomenon that's tied to the technology? I think that's absolutely a possibility. So a long-running theory, and this is the theory, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Bashago, Dr. Bashago, from the Project Pegasus. So he was
I've heard the name. Yeah.
When he was a kid, his dad was working on something called Project Pegasus, with CIA-funded time travel experiment. And the first version only could let kids go through for some reason, for an energetic reason, whatever. They made a time machine, and the first version wouldn't take an adult, so they needed kids. So he used his son, Andrew, and he went back in time for a few minutes and then came back. He'd bring something back with him. Then he went back to a different time. He saw the Declaration of Independence in America get signed. But there's a lot of information. So I spoke with him once privately on the phone. And we were talking about the 20-year mark, because I've noticed that with all the people that I work with, that it's always a 20-year mark. It's 20 years. And he said, well, we could only travel, we could go back 100 years. We couldn't go back 101. We had to go in 20-year increments. And he said it's an energetic cycle that the Earth is on. He said when you look at rings and trees, there's 20 rings, and then a big one, and then 20. The tree rings have it, and there's a natural cycle. It's like an energy cycle of the Earth, and we tap into that. When we were traveling time with the Pegasus equipment, he said we could go 20, 60, 80, 100, but we couldn't go 25, 35, we couldn't go where we wanted. We had to go within 20 years. He said, now we can. Now they figured it out. But in the beginning, they were locked into it. Yeah, they figured it out. But in the beginning, the first versions of the program, they were locked in 20-year increments. And so it makes sense that, when you look at light, for instance, there are light waves that are so big that the next one doesn't get here for 20 years. So light does a wave like this, and we see just a small bit of them. They're small, they're tiny. All the light waves we see can fit inside your pupil. So any wave that's bigger than your pupil is invisible to us. We don't see it. But there are waves that are big. There are waves that are big as a mountain. There's waves that are big as the Earth, and there are light waves that are, you see one, and then 20 years later, they're 20 years up and down size. So that's a spectrum that we don't see. So there's many cycles that are probably affect technology that we're unaware of, like that. So the Saturn stuff, I would love to check that out. You should email me that, and so I can read it, and we'll talk about it later. I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, cool. All right. Before we wrap up, I know that as people start to come back, it can be incredibly hard on the psyche, on the emotions, on the physical body even, and going through, a data download of like 3 days, like you described, of just having memory come back, that pays a big toll on the human experience. What would you say to people if that was occurring now, or they've recently been through that? What are some of the first steps? I mean, obviously they can connect with you through a session or program. I'll put all the details about in the description box.
Please. They can find me on TonyRodrigues.com, and links to all my stuff, my shows and my books and everything. That's the best question ever. And I have had to say this to people. A lot of people come back, especially when they're young, especially when they're first taken, and withdraw from life. They come back and they have traumatic emotions, and they have a feeling of hopelessness, of not being in control, and they withdraw. And I tell them the same thing that I would tell anybody, and especially teen kids, is that it can't rain every day. You don't withdraw now because you want to still have your act together when the sun comes out. So right now you feel like there's no hope, but the reality is the longer you live, the more likely you're going to have very happy days. And that's just how life, and it doesn't matter about your trauma or your program or your luck. It's life. You know, it's not going to rain every day. Today it's raining, tomorrow it's sunny, the next day it's raining, it's sunny, it's raining, sunny. That's life. And so you need to get on the board with that. Nobody owes you happiness, and happiness is much better with a contrast against sadness. So, you know what I mean? You're not, your food is not, if you're not hungry, your food is not delicious. So you have to have some hunger for that happiness that builds up. And that's what I tell, if you came back and you're feeling that great despair, what I did, and that's what I did. And I just sucked it up and lived. I mean, I wasn't gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm still alive. So what I've learned, so I don't know this from practice. I know this from experience, is that there's a back end of it. It'll go away. You're going to snap together, and you have an advantage at that point. When you snap out of the despair, you'll have the advantage of knowing what it's like and what you don't, and appreciating where you're at. Like I said, it's one thing that you don't need anymore. It leads you to being the person that needs the least, because you're aware of what it was like when you were in great despair. So it's an advantage in some regards. There's always a silver lining, and it's not forever. I would tell everybody that. And kids nowadays are like, I think kids are depressed because they stare at the screen. They do very little. They're not active. And I think that drives depression. And I always tell kids that are depressed, which they seem to be all of them these days, and I say, it won't be like this forever. You're not always going to be down on your luck. You have to be ready. You have to be ready to be surprised and have your best day. You don't even know what your best day looks like right now, and it's coming. Trust me. So that's my advice to that. It's across the board. It's the kind of like, it can't rain every day has really saved me.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I love that. It can't rain every day. I think my equivalent was that, let's see what tomorrow brings.
Yeah. Oh, it just is as certain as things are going to go south, as certain as the rain is coming, the sunshine's coming too. So yeah, that's just a different way of saying the same thing.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you so much, Tony. This has just been such a privilege and an honor to sit down and connect with you and fire all these questions that have been ruminating in my mind for a couple of years now. And I just want to thank you for the work that you have been putting out and continue to do so, because I truly see how impactful it is and how many people it helps and supports and will continue to do in the future. So I highly recommend to check out Tony's book, connect with him if you feel guided to do his program. All the links will be in the description box below. And yeah, just massive heartfelt gratitude to you, Tony, and all that you've shared, all that you've been through, and the person that you are here today. I think that's it's a real inspiration for many. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say hi to everybody, and thanks for listening. And I think 23 is going to be a big year. I've got a lot of projects in the works, and things are turning around. I think that I think this is we got coming into a big year and a good time in the world. So I'm very optimistic about everything, and I love you guys, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll be back again with another episode.